Well, good morning, folks, and welcome back to the farm. She's an absolutely gorgeous Saturday morning here. It was cool this morning. It was about 4 degrees outside, but it's actually warmed up incredibly. Charlotte's having the time of her life. We got to do a little bit of early chores today because we did chores late yesterday. In fact, I was tied up setting up for a fundraiser, which we've got tonight. So the meat chickens had actually already gone to bed by the time I dumped their food over the fence. So they had lots of breakfast this morning. That's fine, but they're gonna get lunch instead of supper tonight, because tonight I gotta go to this fundraiser, and so we're juggling feeding times, and that's gonna be okay as long as they got everything they need. The other thing we're gonna think about doing is probably expanding the netted area, just because I gotta be away for business for a couple of days next week, and so just make sure they got lots of grass to eat and places to roam, and a little bit less work for the wife. So this is the chicken village. You can see the nets all set up around here, but they are, they've been here static in one spot with this big netted area for, I think, probably about a week now. So that's pretty much all this area can sustain. So now I'm going to take another section of net and open it up into here. And this is actually an area that they previously went through with the chicken tractor and has now recovered. One thing I'm actually thinking about exploring is, you can see there's a few areas where it's kind of patchy there, and that's not from the chickens going through. That's just, we actually ran a water line through here, and so it just never really fully recovered from the excavation. So one thing I'm thinking about doing is, after the chickens go through, or maybe even before, I don't know, but just sprinkle grass seed directly on top. It's probably before. I'll probably sprinkle grass seed on the ground. Just broadcast it, and then have the chickens run over that area and spread manure and kind of work. They do a little bit of scratching and tilling and work some of that seed into the soil, and see if we can fill in a few of the patchy areas here. Another exciting update is the greenhouse is starting to face the right direction here. So we had all this kind of assembled on the ground. It was just laying there. Then I lost the instructions for 2 or 3 days. When we assembled this all on the ground, or probably putting the last 2 or 3 maybe together, and all of a sudden the wind picked up, and it picked up like harsh, like stuff was blowing across the yard kind of thing. So I'd grabbed the instructions and tucked them somewhere so that they wouldn't blow away, and so that I wouldn't lose them, and so I would still be able to continue on with this project as soon as the weather improved. But needless to say, I couldn't recall where I'd actually placed them. But anyways, found them again. They were in the shop sitting on top of the table saw. And a friend of mine come over the other day, and we actually got these stood up. But it was still really windy at that time. But, for the most part, this can stand. And, because there's no tarp on it, it's pretty wind resistant right now. But you can see all the parts and pieces that are still on there. There's still a lot to assemble. A lot of bracing, cross bracing, I think they call these purlins that go on the roof and the sidewall. So we got to tie all them together, and they'll just go on with clamps, bolt-on clamps and everything, and then tighten up I put all the bolts in on the bottom where the posts tie in, get all that tightened up. And then it's going to be a matter of finding a day. Well, today actually would have been a beautiful day because there is no wind at all this morning, and I think that's probably the secret is come out at 8 o'clock in the morning when it's just calm and quiet like this, and just drag it over and get it tied down before 11 o'clock or noon, when generally the wind starts to pick up. But anyways, it's looking like it's starting to face the right direction. It's kind of starting to look like a greenhouse. Anyways, I gotta get the water cans filled up here. I don't know if you missed it the other day or not, but we did a bit of an experiment here. So we stopped feeding in these feeders here and just fed soaked feed directly on the ground. As you can see, they're just eating right off the ground here, but it's soaked feed, so they're actually drinking less, about half of what they usually would. So that's kind of, it's just an input change, right? I'm having to put water in the bucket with the feed. I'm having to pack that extra weight in the bucket of feed instead of have to pack it for these. But nevertheless, every 2 days I can fill these up now instead of every day, so that's good. I'm hoping the weather holds. We're looking at just the way our schedules work out. We're probably going to be doing butchering on the 22nd, 23rd, somewhere around in there. So of course we don't want frost freezing the waters and things like that. I've got these heat traced and insulated, so I can plug these in and they will stay frost free till about minus 17. That's the magic number. Yeah, one's out. That's fine. They don't go nowhere. They just kind of chill. They just hang out. But yeah, so I don't want to be packing water every day anyways, but I certainly don't want to be packing water and having it freeze and having to bring waters in and defrost them and then fill them back up and set them back out just to freeze again. So we kind of want this to come to an end here pretty soon. They keep getting out here, and you can look right there where this chicken is. There's a missing piece of wire in the fence, and that's just the perfect size for a chicken to poke their head through and come on out. So we're gonna have to do a little patch job right there. Just an update on the riding lawn tractor project here. I did have the battery charger on there for a couple of days. I was able to turn the key and make it click, but then that was it. That was the end of the project. So that battery needs to be replaced before we can go any further. So I got a part number off the side of it. When I got time next week, I'll run into Grand Prairie. We'll start with a new battery. That kind of always sucks because you're starting from a point of having to spend money before you know if you're even going to be successful with the rest of the project. But that's pretty much mission critical. I got a couple of other batteries floating around here, but they're probably end of life anyways, and they certainly wouldn't fit inside that hole. That's about 3/4 the size of a regular car battery. So I could probably jimmy rig something together, but it wouldn't be enough to be successful with the project. So we'll start off with a new battery, and then we'll go from there. One other thing I wanted to show you guys was over here in this is kind of a little paddock in behind the barn here, or it's in behind the shop here. We're keeping the horse and the donkey back here right now, but over the last few winters we've typically kept sheep in back here. So one of our breeding flocks out of the two has been back here with the ram, and we've fed in these hay feeders, but there's always some waste, right? There's always a little bit that gets turfed out, and that kind of accumulated in this corner over here. And you can look at what that looks like now. It certainly doesn't look like hay, does it? It looks like fantastic compost. And that is because of the work that the chickens do, because the chicken house is right next door. So we have a symbiotic relationship between a waste product and a chicken, a bunch of chickens actually. So they can come in here and they till and scratch and they work that all up. Now I'm not going to reclaim this compost and go put it in the flower beds or put it in the garden or do anything like that. The whole point of this was because there was, on the sheer side of a hillside, there was no topsoil. So this is really just about a soil building, soil conservation, soil stability project that I've kind of been working here. And so what we'll end up doing is we'll end up moving that feeder further over to the other side a little bit, and then they can kind of work on that side of the hillside a little bit. So it's tough to see to the naked eye, but if I look kind of sideways, you could probably kind of get an eye for the slope that happens here. When we built the shop, we had to build, of course, a clay pad, and we borrowed dirt from this side of the hill. So this is actually all kind of a burrow pit, but it's not a pit necessarily. It's just we just changed the grade and moved a bunch of stuff up there. So that means now, of course, we put all the topsoil back as best as we could, but there's still some areas definitely right in here where the topsoil isn't what it could be. So that's why we'll move the feeder over, and then we'll allow for that waste to occur. And it's right next door to the chickens. They'll come in and they'll work it in, and we'll get some much improved growth, that's for sure. Now, of course, like I said, we typically keep sheep back here in the winter, the late fall and winter, and then as we get forward into lambing, they go back over towards the barn. But we're keeping the horses in here now, but just because there is limited growth in here, and this one here gets some sore feet if she eats too much, so it just helps us, control the diet so she doesn't eat too much and end up going foundering and stuff, because that's really quite uncomfortable. So some pretty intensive management for this old girl, but she's such a quiet, good little pony, good with the kids, really good temperament, and a lot of good happy years left in her. But it just creates a bit of work for us. Same with Elsie, right? Well, Elsie's never had foundering issues, but one needs a friend, right? But she's got a really good temperament too. So hey, yeah, you're a good girl. Just fantastic with the kids. It's just amazing. I tell you, there's no better way to raise kids.
I touched the
You touched your nose? Yeah. Than to have some animals around and give them kind of a sense of responsibility and empathy and compassion. Now while I'm back here, I just happened to notice this one chicken. I'm just going to show you here. And you can see looking a bit like a bit of a scrag bag. So you know it's getting colder at night here. We're getting reduced daylight hours. We're getting down to 3 or 4 degrees here in the early mornings. What does that mean? What is that triggering? It's triggering the molt. The molt is a period where the chicken's going to lose all their feathers. Not all of them, but most of them. And they replace those feathers. So they need a bit more protein in their diet. They could probably use a little bit more daylight. It's actually the lack of daylight, not so much the temperature swing, but the reduced daylight hours that trigger that biological reaction, I guess, whatever you want to call it. It's just a natural process they go through every year. And of course, when they go to replace those feathers, there's a significant protein impact upon their body. So what does that mean for the chicken keeper? Well, that typically means reduced egg production. So there was a whole thing last year. There's this big conspiracy theory out on social media as to whether or not there was something going on with the chicken feed, or whether there was, you know, I don't know. Anyways, it was all nonsense. Really, it all centered around this time of year. Chickens go into molt, and you have to do certain things. You have to introduce light. You have to introduce high protein feed. You have to make sure that the stress is reduced. They're warm. They're comfortable, and do all these things to facilitate them coming back into lay. Otherwise, if you just kind of leave them to their own devices, they may not lay for 3-4 months. And you know, if you're comfortable with that, great. But breakfast time gets pretty lonely if they're not, you know, carrying their weight, because they'll eat just as much whether they're laying eggs or not. So you can see what this old bird is doing here is not only converting that old waste hay into compost by digging and scratching and speeding up the decomposition and breakdown of that material, but also having a bath. Yeah, absolutely. You might find this with your chickens, is that randomly they dig a hole in the yard and they're fluffing up dust, and you're like, are they sick, or like what's going on? They're not. That's just how a chicken has a bath. They spread out their feathers and they get full of dust, and then they shake it all out, and that helps clean. Believe it or not, that's actually what helps them get clean, and is a really good way to keep any kind of parasites, lice, mites, that kind of thing off of their body. So this is a perfectly normal, natural thing, as Eugene Levy would say. So if you see this in your chickens, don't worry about it. So it's now Sunday, early Sunday afternoon. We got finished with our fundraiser, got home about, it was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. Went back this morning at 10. Actually, I was planning on being there at 8, but I actually didn't even wake up. The wife punched me at 9 o'clock in the morning and said, you better get your ass out of bed and go there and get cleaned up. But anyways, yeah, we got finished cleaning up, and I bid on something really cool with this Champion generator at the auction. I figured we'd take that out to the cabin. However, yeah, I was the winning bidder, but then when I went to pay for it, somebody else had already paid for it for me. So that was incredibly generous. So we're gonna love that set up at the cabin. Got one kid sleeping in the back of the SUV here. She's just toast. So been check on her. Yeah, she's nap time for sure. So just leave that running with the AC on. She's nice and cool. Let her have a little bit of a sleep. I think I'm gonna go get a bite of lunch. So I'll let you go for now. Hope you're having a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you tomorrow.